Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei. I want to welcome everybody to my final segment of music and spirituality. And I'm so pleased, I'm so happy to introduce to you my oldest friend. We just, before our program started, we just talked about it. We know each other for 60 years, 6-0. And Semyon Bychkov, or as I call him, Senya, and he called me Misha. So I guess we're gonna do whatever comes first, whatever's comfortable for us. He is Chief Conductor and Music Director of Czech Philharmonic, and has a tremendous things to share with us about his life, about music, about all the subjects I would like to talk to him about. But before I let him speak, I would like to put YouTube segment for you to see him in action as a conductor. And for those of you, and I'm sure many of you would be interested just to learn more about Senya, you can find hundreds of YouTubes where he conducts all the world best orchestras. So in the first YouTube, which I would like to show you, he conducts Dvorak Symphony No. 7 with Berliner Philharmonic. Richard, put it on, please. Bravo, bravo, beautiful. Senya, can you start and tell us a little bit about your upbringing? How did it all start for you?
My dear Misha, of all people, you know
I
exactly
do
how it
know. I
started
know.
because it started for both of us in the same place and at the same time.
Well, I do know, but people who are joined in our program, they don't.
Well, I think just like you are, I have been very fortunate to be born in the city of what then was Leningrad, today St. Petersburg again. As you were, I was equally fortunate to be accepted in the Glinka Choir School, where we studied for 10 years, both musical and academic subjects. Everything was mixed. And which means we all had the same curriculum. All of us played piano. All of us sang in the boys' choir. All of us had to study mathematics and literature and physics and whatnot. Uh, and you and I both shared something very important for many years. We were members of the Dynamo volleyball team.
All right. Well, I have a proof to your words, and I would like Richard, please bring us picture number one. Richard. Richard, are you there? Can we have a picture number one, class picture? No. Okay, that's picture number one. Here's the picture number one. Okay, so we have first grade. This is year 1960. It's our first grade class, 20 boys. It was only boys' school. And you have, I'm on right, and Senya dead center. And we have portraits of all famous Russian composers behind us. That was our bringing. Now, picture number two, what he just said. Okay, so we were members of semi-professional volleyball team. I am on the right, and Senya next to me. And we actually, it was a hobby, it was a love of the sport, and it was very serious. And we have time for everything, right?
We did have time for everything, which is quite remarkable when you think that you would have, for 6 hours, you will have classes in Glinka school. And then you will still have a lesson of piano and or conducting, and they would be separated. Some of them would be in the evening. So in between, sometimes we would go to a training session of the volleyball team, 3 times a week. In fact, we took it very seriously, and I think it was just as the Glinka school itself. I think being part of that team and having the coach that we did, who was a remarkable personality himself, I think it was uh, an enormous lesson of life and character building as well, because there are certain things that you learn in sports, how to be part of the team, how not to give up, and know that the game is not decided until the final whistle is blown. It's never lost until that moment, but it's also never won. And all of those things, of those things, they stay with you throughout your life. And in the end, everything that we apply ourselves to requires exactly those qualities. And that's why I think that sport is so important, not only for the physical well-being, for health. Sport is equally important for building of character. And all those years that you and I we shared together with other boys, uh, those were the formative years that in a way helped to determine who we would become.
Wonderful, wonderful. So can you tell us about beginning of your conducting career? Again, we started all together. We started in the school. And by the way, for everybody else, it was a fantastic school. We were so fortunate to get into this school. It was only two schools for the whole Soviet Union like that, one in Leningrad and one in Moscow. And we were fortunate to be pupils of that school. So tell us about first conducting experiences.
Well, actually, I dreamt to be a conductor when I was probably about 9 years old. Singing in the boys' choir, of course, was being led by our conductor, and he was, in a way, my first prototype. And singing under his direction and seeing what he did uh, gave me the idea that it was the only thing I ever wanted to do in life, and it stayed with me ever since. And then, of course, as some years went by the time we reached the age of 13 and had the final 4 years in the Glinka school, we were also started receiving choral conducting lessons. And so every one of us had a conducting professor. All of us conducted the choir in which we were part, singing and also conducting it. And at the same time, it became clear to me that symphonic and operatic music was where I wanted to go, and not only a choral music. And so I started taking private lessons. Uh, Private lesson today is understood that you go, you find a teacher, and you pay him for a lesson. Well, as the way it happened for us, we never paid for a lesson, never ever. It was a genuinely extraordinary, very normal, at the same time, idealistic way of our teachers sharing with us their ideas, their life experience that eventually we would be doing to the ones who came after us. And so I started taking those lessons with a pupil, former pupil of Ilya Musin, professor of the Leningrad Conservatory, who eventually became my teacher. And at the same time, I started attending the class of Ilya Musin and just observing and sitting and seeing how he imagined conducting, how he defined it, how he explained it, and how he gave it to his pupils. So when the time came to graduate from the Glinka Choir School, it was time to enter the conservatory. And so I tried my luck by uh, taking exams at the orchestral conducting department. It was, I have to say, I was so young that I was probably very foolish, because it was so completely against the idea that was prevalent at the time at the faculty of the conservatory, that one had to be already a very mature person and musician, having studied and graduated in various other disciplines, instrumentalist or composer or musicologist, it doesn't matter. Uh, Therefore, people who presented themselves for conducting orchestral conducting program were considerably older. And here I was, a youngster of 17 years, trying to compete for the only place that was available. Uh, and I was lucky enough, I was accepted. And from there started this period of several years of me being part of class of Ilya Musin. And to him, as to several other uh, pedagogues that I had, I really owe everything that happened to me later on in my professional activity. Uh, and after that, when I decided to emigrate to America, I came to America, and of course, I left several months before my graduation from the conservatory in Leningrad. I didn't even have a diploma. And as a conductor, this is a catch-22 situation, because how can you demonstrate your ability if you have no one to conduct? And no one will give you that chance unless they know that you can do it. So when I came to New York in 1975, I have enrolled in Mannes College of Music. And within a couple of months, I conducted student orchestra as a student. And it was seen by the then president of Mannes College, Risa Stevens, who earlier on was a great star of the Metropolitan Opera. By then, of course, she retired from stage. She became president of Mannes School. She observed me in that rehearsal conducting Dvorak Ninth Symphony. And next day, she called me in and she asked me if I wanted to be conductor of the student orchestra at Mannes from the following year. So here I am, only a few months in America, already have an opportunity to conduct a year later. And from there, everything started. The concerts and the rehearsals, of course, with the student orchestra. It was a laboratory in which I could try repertoire. I had to find a way how to help kids understand what the problems are and how to solve them. And from there started everything.
Wonderful. I want to bring us a little bit back because your professional life and my life, they intertwine all the time. And so after our studies in Glinka School, after our studies in conservatory, where you were the only one who went to the orchestra conducting department, and all of us from our Glinka School, we went to choral conducting department. But then in 75, you left, and Emma and I, we were following the next year. So you were first one who left to United States, and the next year, in 76, we were following. And the story says that both Emma and I, we were trying to get to Canada because Emma had a family there. And the Canadian government turned us down. And the only other place we knew somebody, and you go where you know somebody, was New York City, where Semyon Bychkov was there, who just came there, who was a student, who didn't have anything, who didn't know anything. And he was the only one we knew. So I called you, and Jewish committee said, well, you need to have a sponsor. You need to have somebody to take you for 2 weeks and give you lodging, and then we'll take over. So Senya didn't wait a minute. He said, yes, you're coming to New York. I'm signing the papers. And Senya met us at Kennedy Airport in New York and brought to his studio apartment in Queens, New York, where we lived together for 2 weeks in this square room, one room apartment, not one bedroom, a studio for 2 weeks. And of course, we will never forget that, always be grateful. And that was beginning of our American experience. So back to you, Sina. After your experience with Manus College, how did you get to your first serious conducting jobs and experience?
It was a lack of opportunities that came because as I was conducting Manus Orchestra, we were giving concerts, several concerts every year, and people came to listen to us. And so it started somehow by word of mouth. And several years later, I think 3 years later, came an opportunity to replace someone to conduct the final concert of the Spoleto USA Festival. And so, of course, I accepted it. I conducted it. I came back to New York. Within days, I received a call from Christopher Keane, who was, as well as music director of the Spoleto USA Festival, he was also music director of the Art Park Festival in New York by Niagara Falls. And he asked me if I would want to go and conduct Il Trovatore there of Verdi because someone else canceled. I did, and that brought me in contact with the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra because they played opera productions in the summer festival at Art Park. The result was that after literally the first rehearsal, the contact with the musicians was so warm and they were so incredibly supportive. They went to their management and they said, we would like him to be part of us. And with that came an invitation to be an associate conductor of the Buffalo Philharmonic, which was 1 year later transformed into the title of principal guest conductor. Being an associate for me meant I could choose my programs. to conduct. I worked with orchestra in as much rehearsal time as I felt was needed. Again, it was a laboratory, but it was based on extraordinarily supportive help from the musicians of the orchestra. Some of them were young, but lots of them have been there for a long time. And they played with the conductors that of the past that led them, like Joseph Krips and Steinberg and Michael Tilson Thomas. And somehow they felt that I fit. They accepted me from the very beginning as one would accept a young colleague, a younger person I was at that time, of course, I was in my 20s. And from there started a relationship with that orchestra. 1 year later, someone who was on the board of the opera company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was visiting Art Park Festival and heard me conduct Faust of Gounod there because I was re-invited. That person went back to Grand Rapids, knowing that Grand Rapids Symphony were searching for a music director. And the following season would be the season where there would be various conductors that would conduct the orchestra, and eventually they would choose the new music director. I received a call saying, would you like to come? I said, I'm not a candidate, but I would be happy to accept an invitation. 2 months later, I was there. That was October of 1979, conducting that orchestra with the Mahler Fifth Symphony, which I did for the first time in my life, as well as Mozart's 39th Symphony, E flat major. It was October, so it was, I think, the second concert that they were playing that season, and there was still the whole season ahead. Well, after that concert, there was a meeting of the board and of the players, and they asked me to accept to be their next music director. I did accept it, and a year later, I moved to live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, while continuing as a music director, while continuing to be principal guest of the Buffalo Philharmonic. And that was one more extraordinary experience, because living in New York, which I did for 5 years, it gives you a very limited impression of the United States. We all know that New York is a tiny part of America, but not all of it. The country is not only very vast, it's very complex and has so many regions, so many dialects, so many mentalities, if you will. And so to find myself in the Midwest, it was a truly valuable human experience and a cultural one as well. Plus having my own professional orchestra with which I could conduct whatever I felt I needed to do at that time of my life. That was extraordinary. And it was there that I became US citizen in 1983. It was there that I conducted for the first time in my life American national anthem as a citizen once I swore to the flag. It was the concert on the 4th of July in front of 250,000 people on the Grand River in Grand Rapids. It was there that I received a telegram from then President Reagan welcoming me to the US citizenship. So many things happened there that are, even though they're not directly musically related, they are part of who you are and who you become, which then influences the way we make music, because music and life, they cannot be separated. And so it was 5 years of that relationship with the Grand Rapids Symphony. And meanwhile, my relationship with the Buffalo Philharmonic developed in such a organic way that when Julius Rudel stepped down as a music director, they have asked me to become his successor. So from 85 to 89, this is what I did. And it's, to this day, it remains a relationship of extraordinary affection that in fact never died down.
Beautiful. So now you had a wonderful relationship with 2 American orchestras. You became American citizens, and you decided to go to the different part of the world. You decided, enough of America. I'm going back to old country. Not old country, old world. Okay, so what happened?
Well, it was not that I said to myself, enough of America. That idea never crossed my mind. In fact, had I said enough of America, you know what would have happened? Living in Europe, specifically in France, I would have eventually become a citizen of one of the European countries, France, Italy, Germany, those countries in which I have been doing so much work. I chose not to do it. I'm holding only one passport, and that happens to be US passport. So I never said to myself, enough of America. It just so happened that while I was conducting in America, not only Buffalo Philharmonic or Grand Rapids Symphony earlier, but guest conducting other leading American orchestras. But I also started to guest conduct in Europe and came in contact with Berlin Philharmonic and London orchestras and so many others. Also, Orchestre de Paris. And so what happened is that at the same time that I made my debut with Orchestre de Paris, I have met Marielle Labec, who became my future spouse. And so my life has changed in the sense that I moved to France for both professional and personal reason, family reason. I became music director of the Orchestre de Paris that I led for 9 years, in fact. So my life ever since 1989 has been based in France, and it continues to this day. You see, you give as much time as necessary to the orchestra to which you commit yourself, but it still leaves you an opportunity to visit others because there are close relationships that have been formed over the years. And I'm not someone who will forget old friends just because I have new ones. And so I continue to come to America to conduct, whether it is Metropolitan Opera or New York Philharmonic or Chicago Symphony or San Francisco Orchestra. All of them are friends, and the friendship continues. Perhaps I'm not able to do it as often and as much as I could do it in the past because life went on, and after 9 years of leading Orchestre de Paris, my life brought me to Cologne Radio Orchestra in Germany, and practically at the same time to the Semperoper in Dresden, of which I was also chief conductor. After many years of that, somehow, totally unexpectedly, life brought me to the Czech Philharmonic, and that is my current position, and it is an absolutely extraordinary artistic and human experience, I have to say. So at the same time, I'm still visiting old friends and I'm still making music with them.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let's see you in action one more time. Richard, if you can put a second video where Semyon conducting orchestra, BBC orchestra and chorus in performance of Dies Irae from Verdi Requiem. Great. Wonderful performance. It's been like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, but going through all your YouTubes, I thought it one of the very fantastic performances. How big was that choir? I would guess 100 voices, probably, at least.
It was much more than that. There were three choirs that were reunited for that performance, Misha. It was BBC choir, BBC Symphony Choir. It was London Philharmonic Choir. And it was also a choir of the Teatro Regio, which is an opera house in Torino, Italy, with which I had a very very affectionate relationship, because we've done certain things together that remain in memory, and I admire them so much. And so I asked the BBC proms. I said, for this performance, I would love to have the combination of British voices, but also Italian voices, because the music needs it. And so we brought those three choirs together, and there must have been at least 250 voices there in that performance. Royal Albert Hall, it can happen.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. The question which I have for you, and I do know most of your answers, because I was following, your career, and we lived together. And by the way, I knew your parents very well. You knew my parents very well, and I mean, we know each other really. You don't have to explain me things, but for our audience, I want you just to tell a couple of things. So you left Russia at the age of 21, 22. Have you been back? I mean, yes. You left for good, because we all left for good, never to come back.
Correct.
So
let's remember that at the time when both of us have left, 1 year apart, it was a period of Cold War. And when we left, as you say, we have left for good. I personally have left as a very angry person, because I completely rejected the system in which we were forced to live. I rejected ideology. I rejected the idea of dictatorship. All of that was foreign to my nature. And at the time when I left, I didn't think I would ever be able to come back, because if circumstances wouldn't change, I wouldn't come back. In addition to that, once I left, my parents have applied for immigration visa and were refused, because my father was a scientist and was not allowed to leave the Soviet Union for 12 years. And that, of course, only reinforced my rejection and my anger. Well, 12 years went by. In 1985, Gorbachev came to power and started what is known as perestroika, and things began to change, and the relationship between two sides of the planet has started to evolve. Suddenly, my father was allowed to emigrate after 12 years of being refused, and that was 1987. And once I received him and welcomed him in the Vienna airport, where he flew, and then he came to live with me in Buffalo, New York. He lived there with me for the last 2 years of my work in Buffalo before I moved to Paris. Once that happened, suddenly I wanted to go back, because first of all, it became possible for someone like me who was denied Soviet citizenship, because once you and I too, once we declared our desire to emigrate, we were stripped of our citizenship. So for people like myself, it would be technically impossible to go there. Well, by then I was an American citizen, and by then it became possible. So in 1987, just around Christmas time, I went with Marielle Labec, with whom my life has already started. She had never been to the city. I wanted to show it to her. And of course, I wanted to visit the city that's dear to me, the city of my birth and the city of unbelievable beauty, and visit the people who were part of my life when I was still living there, and who remained in my heart ever since. And so that was the first time I went. And then later on, quite soon after that, I was invited to conduct Leningrad Philharmonic Orchestra, which I was denied before I emigrated. I was invited to make my debut as a student of conservatory, having won the conducting competition, Rachmaninov's conducting competition. And then the concert was cancelled 1 week before because, quote, I was politically unreliable. And now, all these years later, that was 1974, and now we're in 1988, where I'm coming back this time to conduct that same orchestra. And in fact, I did for several years to come, quite regularly. So the world has changed, and my feeling has changed as well. From anger and rejection, it became more of a feeling of um, the love for the culture and the love for the people and the tradition, enormous tradition of that country has always been there. That had never changed. The anger, in fact, became replaced by seeing how hard the life of the people is, how struggling they were at the time when they were told that the way to live as they did before was no longer good enough. At the same time, they didn't know how to live in another way. And so that became such a contradiction that lots of people were left behind. It was particularly painful for the generation of our parents, who by then were older generation, and they lived their life honestly. They worked, they tried to do the best they could. They were told they were living in the best possible society. Suddenly, somebody comes and tells them that those years they lived were not any good at all. But those years, nobody would give back to them. So how were they supposed to adapt to the new way of life? And that became that kind of contradiction that created enormous disillusion, enormous hardship. Hardship had always been there, but at least there was clarity. And here suddenly the clarity was replaced by uncertainty. And lots of people had a difficult time coping with it. So my own feeling for them was no longer the anger with which I left.
Um, in publicity piece, which we sent to our congregation, there is a quotation um, which belongs to you. And I, of course, 100% agree with you. But I already had a couple people asking me, what did he mean by that? I wanted to say a few words. And it says, Bychkov strongly believes that his Russian upbringing is of crucial importance to the man and artist he has become. Those years were vital, he said. Even the negative aspects of my time in the Soviet Union were of value. They taught me to distinguish between what is positive and what is negative. And the negatives make you stronger. This, I guess, is what people call roots. I think the deeper the roots and the wider they spread, the better. And of course, you do not grow up alone. I had the extraordinary privilege to encounter people who played an enormous role in my upbringing, musical and personal.
I have to say, now that you mentioned this, there is nothing in this quote that I would disagree with today. I don't actually remember when I said it, but it doesn't matter because I believe today the same that I believed then. Uh, the challenges that we encounter in life, they do make us stronger. And you don't have to grow up in the Soviet Union. You can grow up anywhere, but you will still have challenges of different kind. They will make you stronger. Uh, you have to learn from them. And the defeats that you are bound to experience. They should also make you stronger because you have to rebound. That is actually part of playing volleyball or any sport for that matter. Even when you lose, you still have to come back. And that is what I meant. When it comes to personality and culture, I think all of us have roots and all of us can be proud of our roots. But all of us also have, in a way, responsibility to acknowledge that whatever roots we have and whatever history the country in which we are born will have, there will be lots of different pages. There will be pages full of glory that is important for the world and for our civilization. And there will be very dark pages of which one has to be aware and for which one has to atone. Speaking of the Soviet Union, everything I said of the positive side of being brought up by people who were so remarkable as personalities as to influence who I became, that is invaluable. At the same time, can one forget about the Gulag? Can one forget about millions of people that died for no reason whatsoever? No, one cannot. And for that, the nation has still to this day has not atoned. And I think that as long as one does not atone for the darkness of the past, it will keep coming back. So one has to be aware. And that does not mean that one imagines things only through sort of in an idyllic way. No, life is very complex. It's not just black and white. How can one explain that a composer such as Shostakovich, for example, was born and lived all his life in the society that was meant to prevent him from doing what he was doing, from composing the way he was composing? And he became a symbol to all of us, not only in Russia, worldwide. His music is acknowledged as one of the greatest creations of the 20th century, which means, in fact, history. It's a contradiction. How can someone like that emerge in a society that does not allow freedom of expression? And I would think that the only way I can imagine that is precisely because of the pressure put on an individual and the constraints that were put on him, in a way almost forced him to find a way to express himself and become the spokesman for his people at the time in which he lived. And because what his people have lived at that time is so similar to so many other parts of the world where exactly the same things happen. I'm talking about genocide. I'm talking about persecution. I'm talking about slavery. I'm talking about famine. I'm talking about all kinds of things like that, that are connected universally to human condition. Therefore, that makes his music universal and not only music of the Russians, for the Russians. So all of that maybe clarifies a little bit the quote which you just read, Michel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. I would like to put on, Richard, if you can put the last video, which is your kind of commercial for Czech Philharmonic. So I want people to see it.
This is for those of you who are the friends of music, who are the friends of Czech Philharmonic, who are my friends, just for you to know that we are coming to play for you in London at the Royal Academy of Music in October. And after that, we are coming to America to play in New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, in Ann Arbor, in Washington, and many other cities. And after that, we will come later to Musikverein in Vienna. We are looking forward very much to share with you not only the music that this orchestra plays with a very unique kind of beauty. I'm thinking of Dvorak and Mahler and Tchaikovsky, but also in a sense that somehow Czech Philharmonic managed to preserve its unique identity over the decades. It is still an orchestra that sounds different from anyone else. And for me, it means so much simply because it is my new cultural family. it's my first season as the chief conductor of this legendary orchestra, and to have them as my artistic as well as human partners is particularly meaningful, because I have tremendous attachment to all the places where we will perform. For different reasons, all of them have played enormous role in my own life, and now I can finally share with you my new discovery, which is Czech Philharmonic Orchestra. So look forward to seeing you and to playing for you. Until soon.
Great. So I believe I believe it was last year or 2 years ago.
Yes, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And then you were talking about coming to New York and Washington, and you invited Emma and myself to come to the concert in Kennedy Center in Washington. So we were there to see you conducting Czech Philharmonic, and it was fantastic. As all performances we've seen you conduct, because we've seen you in New York City conducting New York Philharmonic. We also saw you in Washington conducting National Symphony. You were there years before. But the question which I have for you, you've done a lot of guest conductings in many parts of the world with the different orchestras, but you also have done opera conducting with many opera houses. What's the difference? Which one you like more? Or it's kind of equal? Can you tell? Because most of the people don't know.
Well, it is, in my case, it's what I need equally, symphonic music as well as operatic music. Operatic genre is naturally much more complex than purely instrumental music, and it's easy to understand because you have so many more elements involved, so many more participants. Orchestra, of course, is in the pit, but on stage you have singers. Each one of them is a character that he or she must portray, and then they have to find the relationship between them that depends so much on the vision of a stage director. And then you have the artists who create decor, lights, costumes. All of that makes the whole experience unbelievably complex, very, very complete at the same time. And I have to say that when it works, it is the most gratifying moment in one's life. When it doesn't, it's an absolute hell. And I've known both, and I accept it.
Which this is transition to our another important subject, which I said to you, we're gonna talk about spirituality and how music connects to spirituality. What does it do? What music does to people, how it touches people. And what do you think about this subject?
Well, it's a huge mystery. We all know that music touches people universally in the most extraordinary way, in which no other art form can or will. What we don't know, why a particular music affects one individual in such a way, but not another. Why someone cannot live without Mozart, and someone cannot live without Stravinsky, and someone cannot live without Beethoven, but someone cannot live with Shostakovich. We don't know how our individually speaking, how our nervous system is affected by the music we experience. But it does have an effect is clear, and lots of scientific studies show extraordinary effect on music on people who are, for example, with Alzheimer's disease. It wakes something inside because it's non-verbal experience. What the sounds do to affect us, to feel us the way we do, remains a mystery. And I hope it always will. But come back to spirituality. What is spirit and how do we define it? It's everything that has to do with our internal life inside us. And it's quite revealing that in the moments of the greatest need, existentially, people realize that they need spirituality, spiritual expression, more than in the moments of prosperity. That's very well known. Because spirituality, meaning whether it is art, whether it is religion, whether it is philosophy, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that it addresses the human condition. And the human condition that lives in the moment of danger is infinitely more attuned to anything that will help it to survive. And I see it now in this strange period of pandemic that we're living, where theaters are closed down, concert halls are closed down. And what can we do as artists in order to remain relevant in the life of our society? And what do? We stream. We play in an empty auditorium. We are on stage. But thanks to the technology that allows us to stream what we do to the rest of the planet, we're able to remain present and to remain relevant, to touch people. And it's very interesting because some say, well, it must be so difficult to play without audience in the auditorium. I say, no, it's not particularly difficult. Of course, we love having people next to us to share with them what we love the most is the music we play. But if we don't have them immediately behind us, we still have them out there. They're watching us and they're listening to us. We are playing in Prague, but they're in Brazil, in Zimbabwe, in Washington, anywhere on the planet. And their reaction is very clear because they send us messages. And when you read these messages, you see to which point it is vital for them what we're giving to them. So spirituality is a huge word, meaning so many things, but in the end, completely connected to the human condition. And I just wish that the need for spirituality would not go down when the sun is shining, that it would remain, because finally it's in that we can find the sustenance to all the challenges every one of us has in our existence.
Beautiful. So to all our audiences, I just want to, from all of them, I want to thank you so much, Senya, for joining us. And I hope that you stay as strong as you always been. I hope you will continue give us the joy of music for many, many years to come. And it's always wonderful just to be with you, share with you, to see your smiling face. And for those who join us late, just tell us where you're right now, because my first question to you, are you in Prague, where you supposed to be? And you said?
I am in France, in my house, in the southwest of France, in the Basque country. I am not in Prague. I finished all the concerts that they were for me to conduct at this time, this year. And now for the next 5 weeks, I am here in my home, studying, thinking, enjoying life, walking in the woods or on the beach, and thinking. And I go back to Prague in 5 weeks' time to record Smetana's Mablast and then continuing the concert programs that we have planned. But at the moment, I am in my home.
Well, thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward, when all this pandemic is done, to see you again hopefully live when you come to America, when you come to different, because we'll drive to New York to see you, and we'll go to Washington, any place. For those who are still interested to learn about Semyon Bychkov live, there are many YouTubes. You can look at him conducting different orchestras, and some interviews. You can learn some other questions I didn't ask him about his life. And thank you. And everybody have a wonderful day. Enjoy it, and see you until we see each other. Take care.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.